You are welcome to my channel. I'll be talking about bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer as part 7 of 7 when it comes to acid-base disorder. The sodium level. Bicarbonate ions level will be somewhat dependent on the level of sodium in the system. For example, sodium bicarb, that is NaHCO3, known as baking soda, when it reacts with strong acid like hydrochloric acid, we'll end up with carbonic acid, that's a weak acid, and sodium chloride, a salt. When that weak acid, that is carbonic acid, reacts with a strong base like sodium hydroxide, we will end up with bicarbonate ions and water. So, a weak base or a weak acid is expected to trap free ions like hydrogen ion and hydroxy ion and stabilize the milieu. Bicarbonate ions concentration to carbonic acid concentration in the system will not be at the same level. We will expect more of bicarbonate ions than carbonic acid at ratio 20:1 respectively. So, more bicarbonate ions. And with the higher level of bicarbonate ions than carbonic acid, we will expect a normal pH. Higher bicarbonate ions will make it easier to neutralize the acids in the system. So in the phase of lactic acidosis and ketoacidosis, we need more bicarbonate ions to stabilize the milieu. When it comes to blood and hemoglobin, carbonic acid level is regulated by the respiratory system with carbon dioxide alteration. Carbonic anhydrase is an enzyme, and that enzyme will serve as catalyst in the equation that I will refer to in a bit. In the blood, hemoglobin is a protein, and it forms about 1/3 of the component of red blood cells. The hemoglobin binds to some acid in the blood. The normal pH is maintained by buffering the hydrogen ion liberated during the conversion of carbon dioxide into bicarbonate as this. You could see that CO2 is reacting with water to form carbonic acid, and dissociation will occur, liberating hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. The CO2 here is carried by the blood to be exhaled. Still on bicarbonate and the renal system, the bicarbonate level will be controlled through the renal system. Remember the equation of carbon dioxide reacting with water, giving us carbonic acid, and then dissociation into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. The bicarbonate ions will be conserved here, and the bicarbonate will get into the peritubular capillaries and from there into the blood circulation. In conclusion, in diabetic ketoacidosis, when glucose is poorly controlled, the tissue will not be getting enough glucose. Energy is required for daily activities, and that will be sought through another means. And what is the only means available to anyone at that stage? That will be fast. The fast will be broken down, and that will lead to ketone bodies being released. Acetoacetic acid will be present, beta-hydroxybutyric acid, and acetone. And all this will lead to increased metabolic acidosis. Decreased glucose supply to the brain will occur, and if that is the case, there will be loss of consciousness, coma, and may lead to death if not immediately attended to. Okay, how will this acid-base derangement be handled? The respiratory system will try to step up and then help out. There will be deep, rapid breathing to compensate for the acidosis. Okay, because we're dealing with metabolic acidosis, right? Then the respiratory system will want to help, and that will trigger a kind of respiratory system going towards alkalosis, okay, to compensate. The individual will have acetone smells. That will be like a fruit. The prevention here, not to get into this problem, is having your glucose controlled. If you are diagnosed already, make sure you are following up with insulin and glucose regulation constantly. This is very common in type 1. That is not to say we cannot find it in type 2, particularly the people that have type 2 and they are on insulin. They can also come down with DKA. Okay. Then the carbonic acid is majorly controlled by the respiratory system, while the bicarbonate ions is mainly controlled by the renal system. The bicarb is freely filtered through the glomerulus, but can get into the renal tubular cells. With the hydrogen ion, that can become water and CO2 in the filtrate. CO2 can be reabsorbed through the membrane. Okay, sodium reabsorbed and hydrogen will be expelled into the filtrate. Then the hydrogen will combine with bicarb, forming carbonic acid, and then later on CO2 and water. The CO2 will get into the renal cells. Carbonic anhydrase will be the enzyme that will catalyze that conversion back into bicarbonate ions, and that will enter into the blood circulatory system. Potassium is helpful in the sense that it competes with hydrogen ion, but high level of potassium means acidosis. Okay, that is the case with diabetic ketoacidosis. The carbonic acid are controlled through the respiratory system, like I've said, by expelling CO2 from the lungs, and increased respiratory rate will decrease the CO2, and reverse is also possible, that decreased respiratory rate will keep more CO2 than giving us respiratory acidosis. So if you have gone through all these presentations from acid-base balance part 1 to 7, you will say that we can't just handle this in isolation. We need to know exactly what is happening to the patient from head down to the toe. Remember, the brain is controlling the respiratory system, controlling all the systems in the body. The respiratory system will act fast to help. The renal system will be willing to help, but they can't do it very fast enough. So metabolic acidosis will be greeted with immediate response from the respiratory system, like we found in diabetic ketoacidosis with deep and rapid breathing, but that is not the way it is going to be very fast with the renal system. And we then go to determine the anion gap. We know whether we're dealing with high anion gap metabolic acidosis, normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, low anion gap metabolic acidosis, and we review the possible causes of all this. With that, I've come to the end of this presentation. Remember to share this presentation with your friends and colleagues. Remember to subscribe to my channel so that you can get more of these presentations immediately they are published. I appreciate it.